ever had those days where out of the blue you start thinking about all the films that you haven't seen in literal decades? Those films that were iconic movies that would be played in class on a rainy day at lunchtime or like on the last day of school for the year. Never usually Oscar-winning masterpieces or stuff like that, but those classic teen movies that had silly storylines and wacky performances, the stomping grounds for older actors looking for a payday, and new up-and-comers getting ready for their run into the big time. So yeah, one of those films, or franchises I should say, surged back into my head with a vengeance recently, and that franchise was of course the Princess Diaries. One of those films that would appear on, well, remember when you'd watch home media and they'd have all the trailers for all the other DVDs that you could buy all slapped on before you could actually watch the movie? I feel like this is the prime example of that sort of thing. It was on everything. Now that gets me nostalgic. Anyway, The Princess Diaries. I don't think this franchise gets the love it deserves. It's a true classic, a star maker, and it's been continually underestimated from the very beginning. I mean, when it first released, nobody thought it was going to be a success. Julie Andrews up to that point had been semi-retired from acting. Anne Hathaway was not exactly a very well-known actress. And she even scored the part over a number of more well-established names. On top of that, apparently G-rated films were not the rage back then, and despite optimism and careful marketing from Bob Iger and Disney, industry experts and commentators expected the film to be a bit of a failure. But of course that's not what happened. This glorious film defied expectations, and despite mixed reviews, would go on to become a sleeper hit, grossing $165 million off a budget of $26 million. A pretty impressive feat given the circumstances, and one that well and truly got Disney excited, paving the way for cinematic releases for lots more family-friendly entertainment, revitalizing the career of Julie Andrews, who'd moved away from the industry quite a bit in the past decade or more, and springboarding Anne Hathaway into superstardom, setting her up as a massively bankable lead actress going into the 2000s. So already that's a pretty damn successful film for what it was. And yet, whilst it's sort of looked back on fondly these days, I do also think the world forgets what a massive impact this movie had. It proved that these sort of G-rated films were legitimate box office draws, that they could compete and they had value. And now knowing this, you can see the slew of G-rated films that came in its wake that had a lot of success, earned the studios lots of money. And all that success, it's riding on the coattails of this movie. It proved there was the market. Just like the Dark Knight trilogy and Iron Man proved there was still a market for superhero films. But on top of that, the film just slaps in general. For those that may have forgotten, The Princess Diaries tells the story of Mia Thermopolis, a teenage girl living in San Francisco. She's the typical protagonist for this sort of film, you know, the frumpy, ugly teenager. And credit to the filmmakers, at least in this film, they tried to make her appear ugly. I mean, Anne Hathaway's a Hollywood actress, so they definitely had their work cut out for them, and she does not actually appear to be ugly. Like, realistically, they did not succeed in their quest, but at least they tried, which is better than most do. They gave her some frizzy hair, some big glasses. Like I said, at least they tried. Anyway, it tells the story of this geeky girl with her geeky friends who discover she's the long-lost heir to the throne of Genovia, a fictional European nation, and that now that her father's died, she needs to be prepared to rule. Also in the story, Mia knows none of this. She didn't know her father at all, as her parents thought that her being permanently estranged from her father and then only discovering who she is and who he was after he dies is the right move, because obviously that's not going to cause a whole heap of psychological issues, is it? At that point, surely it would have been easier to just grow up a rich and pampered royal, surely. Oof, you're going to need a therapist, kid. But yeah, grandma drops in, out of the blue, and decides to groom her into an heir worthy of the throne, and also unleashes the mother of all media storms upon this poor kid. Antics ensue, as does teen romance and friendship angst. And in the end, she's victorious. She proves herself to be a worthy heir to the throne and humbles her bullies and doubters in the process. Hell yeah. Whew, just writing out the synopsis, get me hyped for the movie. Need to watch it again. Love it. But of course, then you come to the reviews. Those damn Rotten Tomatoes ratings. And for the audience, 68%. It's not great, and I'll be honest, I do think it deserves to sit higher, maybe somewhere in the 70s, early 70s. But beggars can't be choosers, can they? It's still a decent rating, all things considered. But then you come to the critics' score, and it's like, oh, come on. Hitting me with that 49% rotten rating? Nah, that's not acceptable. Sometimes I do wonder if people just hate fun. Is everyone truly so dead inside? Like, what are people expecting when they go to see something like this? Shakespeare? And like, I guess this just goes to show pretentious reviewers are not a modern phenomenon. They've always been a thing. always unable to comprehend fun. Like, how are you going to go to a film like this and not judge it on a different rubric? This is like going to Fast and Furious and comparing it to Barbie and complaining when it's not like Barbie. It doesn't make sense to do that. And yet I'm looking through some of the reviews from the time it came out, many of which hate on the film, calling the plot predictable. Like, what do these people want? Is Mia meant to pull a Tommy gun out of her ass and just send Nana off to hell? No shit, the plot's predictable. It's a Disney film made for kids with a very, very obvious storyline, but that doesn't make it bad. I hate that the world seems to think that having a typical story, a predictable story, a story that makes sense, automatically means it's bad. You always knew that in Star Wars, Luke was going to overcome the dark side and save the day. In Lord of the Rings, you knew that Frodo would destroy the ring and vanquish evil forever. If they didn't do these things, the story would be stupid. It wouldn't make sense. You'd feel like you wasted all that time. And so, obviously, I'm not trying to say that the Princess Diaries is on the same level as Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, but surely you understand what I'm trying to get across. That a predictable plot can still draw you in. It can still be enjoyable. And this film is just that. It's pure, lighthearted enjoyment. It's that simple. And on top of that, the film's actually well acted, which for these types of films in the modern day is very rare, but back then apparently not. Very well acted. Has a great cast, especially those two leads. Like, it's honestly such a good performance from both of them. And the world agreed, because it showed that Julie Andrews still had it and revitalized her career. And it showed that Anne Hathaway was going to be a star and kick-started her career. It grossed a shit ton of money for the time, and it opened the door for many, 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 many more films of this type. Specifically, those G-rated cinematic releases. And honestly, it's probably one of Disney's best live-action films, if you ask me. So when you counterbalance all of that worth and achievement, with the reviews it ended up getting, and indeed the position it seems to occupy in today's pop culture, it does get a bit forgotten. I really can't say anything other than it's deeply underrated and deserves to be looked back on more fondly and with more significance. It really is one of the classic films of my generation, or at least classic kids films of my generation, and it spawned a sequel that was also a box office smash, and you could even see a third one. It's in the works. Like, that's over 20 years later, so fingers crossed. And so yeah, I think I've gotten across that this film's great, and it deserves better, right? And so now I'm going to throw it to you. What do you think of The Princess Diaries? Do you like it, hate it, think it's underrated and deserves more love and praise? Or was it trash that needs to stay in the dumpster? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.